Tennessee in the Civil War. It's easy to call it a land divided. Brother against brother is the catchphrase. But what does it mean? What happened to people during the Civil War? How was its effect felt on families, individuals? Amidst the epic struggle, the Civil War ultimately affected people, common folks trying to hold on, not only to what remained of the only life they knew, but to life itself. Hi, I'm Bill Landry with stories of the Civil War on Heartland Tonight. Tonight's stories are from common folks about average people and what happened to them in Tennessee and their experiences in the Civil War. These are their stories. On Heartland Tonight, it's farm boys turned soldiers of the Civil War, their human experience and personal struggle to get home. We'll also explore the growth of medical science to aid them during our nation's bloodiest war. At the war's beginning, the South felt secure in its control of East Tennessee, but that would soon change. With 5,000 residents, Knoxville was the largest town in East Tennessee. It was the center for Confederate sympathy and headquarters of the Confederate Army of Occupation. But even here, loyalties were mixed. Knoxville's mayor, James Luttrell, was a Unionist. So were many prominent citizens like William Brownlow. Confederate guns could hardly match the firepower of this Methodist preacher. His newspaper, the Knoxville Whig, was a deadly weapon that seldom missed its mark. The early romance of the war had stirred the passions of East Tennesseans, but level heads prevailed. By the late summer of 1861, many Unionists here were even cooperating with Confederate authorities. All hopes for peace in our region went up in flames one cold November night in 1861. A small band of Unionists burned 5 bridges along the all-important railroad. Although the physical damage was minor, it was as if an earthquake had struck East Tennessee. The Confederates became paranoid. Every Union man was a suspect. They were arrested by the hundreds. Those who were convicted paid the ultimate price. The mass arrests and the gallows were supposed to frighten the Union population into submission. Instead, the Confederates had dropped a spark in a field of dry grass. The people of East Tennessee were as rugged and stubborn as the land which had shaped them. Unionism ignited the countryside.
You read the letters and the diaries and the reports of the Confederate generals who were in charge of the East Tennessee district, and they talk about how difficult it is to deal with these people, that we try everything. We try the carrot and the stick, and neither one works. We cannot win over the sympathies and the loyalties of the people of East Tennessee. East Tennessee was the only area in the entire nation to undergo Confederate military occupation.
9,000 Confederate troops were forced to remain here to guard railroad bridges and to prevent open rebellion. They were troops that were desperately needed elsewhere. 1862 would be a pivotal year for the Confederates. They were losing the war on the West, and they had been stopped in the East. The Confederacy needed a victory. In December 1862, General Robert E. Lee's army got one. It happened at Fredericksburg, Virginia. As commander of the Northern Army, General Ambrose Burnside had ordered a hopeless charge against General James Longstreet's Confederates. Now Burnside wept with President Lincoln as they counted the Union dead. He was relieved of his command. His blunder shattered all hopes for an early end to the war. It was a costly mistake, one he would not make again. 1862 was a costly year for the Confederates, too. They were losing many men. To get more soldiers, Jefferson Davis reached a grave decision. The Confederacy would become the first government on American soil to use the draft.
Orders came down from Richmond to the Confederate commander here, enforce the draft to the fullest. And the idea was that we'll draft all of these young East Tennesseans, regardless of their sympathies, put them in the Confederate Army, and then we'll ship their units off outside of East Tennessee where they won't cause trouble.
Thousands of Unionists managed to escape before they could be drafted.
They were led by skillful and daring mountain guides like Daniel Ellis of Carter County. Through the course of the war, he helped 10,000 Union men escape to join the Federal Army in Kentucky.
The Adventures of Daniel Ellis, when Heartland Tonight returns. In 1863, East Tennessee was in the grip of a civil war that had become all too personal. The great armies of the war were fighting elsewhere, nameless, faceless rows of blue and gray, clashing on remote fields of horror.
But here in our region, the war was being waged in backyards by neighbors and even families who had worked together and worshiped together. Now they were sworn enemies, enemies with familiar faces. It is in such desperate times that heroes do emerge.
Stonewall Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee are familiar names to us now.
But in East Tennessee during the Civil War, the name of Daniel Ellis would become known throughout the land.
He was a captain in the Federal Army, but he rarely served with his regiment. Daniel Ellis chose a much riskier career. When the Confederates were in power in Upper East Tennessee, Daniel Ellis helped Union men escape their troubled region and join the Federal forces.
He was a rallying force. He carried mail and hope between the Union lines, those men who had escaped, and their families. He would bring money and mail messages back to those people.
On one of his many trips between enemy lines, Ellis came upon two women from Washington County. They were in search of food for their small children. They had traveled 15 miles by foot to get it. Ellis gave them what money he had, and they were very grateful for it. Not a bold, heroic deed, but a compassionate one of many that endeared him to his home folks.
Ellis was a hero to his fellow Unionists, but to the Confederates, he was a marked man. There's another case where he hid in a hollow log, I guess up on Clinch Mountain, and the Confederates came in and actually sat on the log in which he was hiding. Narrow escape after narrow escape. One of his greatest escapes took place while he was visiting his home in Carter County.
During this visit, Ellis and his friend Elbert Treadway were surprised by a platoon of Confederate infantry.
Take that, Ellis!
Outnumbered 10 to 1, they found themselves pinned down in dense woods. The rebel fire was drawing closer. Elbert Treadway seized the moment. He shouted battle orders to an imaginary column of men.
Come on, man, move it up over there.
Soon the dense woods were ringing with the sound of 50 men. The Confederates fell right into their trap.
Run for it, boys, there's too many of them. Fall back, fall back!
Daniel Ellis had defeated death once more.
It is said that Daniel Ellis helped 10,000 Union men escape to join the Federal Army. For safety, he chose to work alone, traveling thousands of miles on foot. In the course of the war, he received no pay for his efforts, and his home was destroyed by the Confederates. Among the great heroes of the Civil War, a little-known man named Daniel Ellis ranks at the top of the list. As soon as the corn was planted, me and Job Ramsey headed off to join up and go fight the Yankees. So begins a Civil War diary about an average kid caught up in that war. The point is that many letters and personal accounts exist, and they're real.
Dear brother, we are in camp near Chattanooga, up in the mountains. We have a fine place to camp, away from mosquitoes. Tonight we had a real feast. It was as good as Christmas back home. We had fresh beef, potatoes, we had corn, carrots, and all kinds of good eatables. Apparently our commissary felt sorry for us. We all ate till we could eat no more. We have been living on lean pork, sow belly, and corn for the past 2 months. When we were in camp, we play all the old songs. It would remind you of when we used to all get together and play in the evenings. We also sing songs which I could not write you about for fear that Mother might see them. Our day starts at 4:30 in the morning. Sometimes we gather acorns and we make this into coffee. We then eat our breakfast and drill. We are constantly heaving our 10-pound rifles up in the air and holding them out and shooting at an enemy that is not there. We went into a fight last week, which I can only now write you about. The sounds of the wounded are still in my ears. We carried wounded off all day long, and I've never worked so hard in my life. Some were so horribly mangled that I knew they would not live much longer. It is something that will make you grow fast, from 16 to a man. I wish you would stay home and help with the farm. I do not think you ought to come at all. If they laugh and say that you are not a man for not coming, pay them no mind, for there are right smart many men here who wish that they had never seen this war, or much older. And you just pray that you'll make it through one more fight. If I ever get home, I think I will appreciate religious things more. I never thought about church as much as I do now. This may be the last letter I write you, for we are going on the march again in the morning. Please do not show this letter to Mother, for she will grieve, but only tell her that I am fine. Give my love to the family. Your brother, John.
A Civil War Christmas when we come back. The harsh realities of war affected each family member, like mothers struggling to keep the home front alive, or boys off somewhere fighting instead of being home for Christmas. A fresh snow adds no cheer to Reba Jeffrey's morning chores. Though she hasn't heard from her boys in months, she thinks of them every day. With them all fighting for the Confederacy, it means another Christmas alone.
I'm sorry I scared you, ma'am. I was just so cold, I couldn't hardly stand it.
What are you doing here?
Reckon I'm dying, ma'am.
I don't care nothing about that, Yankee. There ain't nothing here. Get on out.
I don't think I can move, ma'am.
You're just a boy.
No, ma'am. I turned 17 last month.
It's a cold Christmas. What's your name?
Ben Schuler.
Well, Ben Schuler, where are you from?
Cincinnati.
You're a long way from home, Ben.
Yes, ma'am. I miss it.
Let's see if we can get you in the house. Oh, Lord, Ben. I got two boys about your age, somewhere. Weren't for this war.
This will be over soon.
Silent night, oh. come, all is bright round yon virgin mother and child.
That's pretty, ma'am.
Infant so tender and mild.
This is my first Christmas away from home. It don't hurt much anymore.
Mickey Fox played the mother, and Michael, her son, played the dying soldier. Civil War medicine when Heartland Tonight returns. It's interesting to take a look at where medical science stood at the time of the Civil War, so we did.
It was in this house in 1863 that a Confederate cavalry sergeant named William Penland died. He was barely 19. His untimely death added to a toll unmatched in any American war since. Just a farm boy from the mountains of North Carolina, William's death wasn't the result of combat. Times being what they were, thousands of others were to share his fate. Their story becomes more clear when we see where medical science stood during the dark time that was our Civil War.
They were able to do abdominal surgery, they were doing cataract surgery, they were doing skin grafts.
Civil War authority Ed Archer shows us a standard field hospital.
With the identification, the red flag that would mark it as an aid station. This would be near the battlefield.
With thousands of emergencies to treat, surgeons often had to make do.
So this is a typical operating table, operating theater with the barrels, which were always obtainable, a door from a house.
The only way to fight infection in a wounded limb was to cut it off. And they frequently did, with no notion of sterility. For those in worse shape, surgeons administered one of the miracle drugs of the day, morphia, and let them die in peace. But there were advances in some areas.
They moved to resectioning. If an individual were hit in the arm or in the leg, they found that they could remove that damaged section and rejoin the bone, leaving the individual with an arm, a flail if you want to, or a flap. Anesthesia was used during the Civil War, and it was used for 90% plus of the operations.
At the onset of the war, medical departments were swamped. The surgeons fought back by organizing.
The chain of evacuation was developed during the Civil War, which is still used, or was still used, by the United States Army up until the advent of the helicopter era. Another thing that was developed was a system of triage, which is still used today during mass disasters, of prioritizing your wounds.
No amount of order could ward off the troops' invisible enemy, bacteria, which caused sudden and rampant disease. The Confederates were particularly at risk.
The Southern troops were rural individuals. They'd never been exposed to the communicable diseases.
Mumps and measles, nowadays considered childhood diseases, paralyzed whole companies and affected the outcome of battles. But the gravest danger was from dysentery.
One soldier wrote, beans killed more than bullets, and that's the truth. And the medicines that they had to treat this just were not able to do it.
Helplessness must have plagued the surgeons, as disease claimed twice as many men as combat. For the means to battle the real killers in this war had not yet been developed.
Not because of these men were not trained. It was, again, another 25 years before they even knew what they were dealing with, and then another 50 years before they had any tools to treat it.
The hopelessly ill sought comfort in homes like this one. In an upcoming Heartland episode, we'll tell the story of William Penland in his own words, through letters home to his family. Something as simple as a letter from a Civil War soldier can help us understand the entire Civil War. In this regard, the letters of William Penland are profound.
To farm boys turned soldiers, the American Civil War was not an exciting adventure into glory. Their hardest battles were fought behind the front lines.
In reality, the American Civil War was a stinking personal war of infections and fever and blisters. Those who served paid with their health.
In 1862, North Carolina Cavalry Sergeant William Penland's company was sent to East Tennessee. In his letters back home, William is lonely and homesick, but brave. This is his account of the day-to-day miseries of the Civil War and what was to become a struggle for his own life.
Everything is the highest that ever I saw. Salt is $20 a bushel. There's a good many men sick in camp now, between 60 and 100 men down with the measles. But don't fret, I am as healthy at this time as I ever was in my life. I would have wrote you before, but I had to go out to meet the Yankees. Colonel Folk could not muster more than 150 men in all at this place. I fear deserters will be the ruin of our country. I have a bad cold, very bad. I think I will be well in a few days. We have been doing some very hard scouting. Arch Henson met with a bad accident the other day.
You heard about what happened to Arch, didn't you?
No, with Arch, it ain't no telling.
Arch was walking through the woods the other day and caught the hammer of his rifle on a rock and shot himself in the back.
No!
And I will miss him if he dies. Last account we had of Arch Henson, he was getting better. Mother, I want you to send me that coat. I also want a pair of pants. We have not been getting much to eat since we've been at this place. We have had to give up our tents. There's not been any rain since we gave them up. We are ordered to Monticello, Kentucky. I expect that it is a tolerable scarce country of anything to eat or feed upon.
Over 100 years ago, a Civil War camp was located near this cemetery. William Penland and his company had been through Knoxville, up to Kentucky and back again. By the time they had reached Camp Ebenezer, many were sick, and they were ordered to leave. William Penland was one of them.
Dear Mother and Father, I am not well at present. I have symptoms of the fever, but not dangerously bad.
Today this town is Lake City. Behind me is the Joel Bowling House where William Penland died. Like so many soldiers during the Civil War, William's battle was against unseen enemies, disease and infection. Against these odds, they waged their lives for their beliefs in the American Civil War. William Penland's fate is not unique, but sadly common in the history of that war. This is Heartland Tonight.